Hello, everyone. So this is a video I was trying to make yesterday. The Joe Biden versus Donald Trump race if Joe Biden had stayed on the ticket. That got interrupted by the very, very sad news of Jimmy Carter passing away. So I made a tribute video of that, and then I'm making this video today. So basically, what if Joe Biden hadn't dropped out in mid-July and stayed through the race, done the next few debates with Donald Trump? So a lot of people I've seen would say 400 vote victory for Donald Trump because we've seen recent developments. Joe Biden saying he wished he stayed in the race because he probably would have beaten Donald Trump. He probably wouldn't have beaten Donald Trump, but I don't think he would have lost by 400 electoral votes. And let me explain why. So let's say Donald Trump, if Joe Biden had stayed in the race, 5 point shift towards Donald Trump would have given him Minnesota, Nebraska second district, and then New Hampshire. This would have only gotten to 227 electoral votes with a 5 point shift. Let's make it a 10 point shift. If we see 10 point shift, we see him winning New Mexico. We see him winning New Jersey, new development. New Jersey got significantly closer. And then we see him in Virginia. So that's a 10 point shift, 260 electoral votes. Actually, it'd be 261 because of Maine. And then let's say 13 point shift in the nation would give him New York and Illinois, and that barely gets him over 400 electoral votes. So it would take a 13 point shift to give Donald Trump 408 electoral votes. For that to happen, New York would need to swing by 23 points to the right. New Jersey would need to swing by 16 points. Illinois by 16. Virginia by 15. No, Virginia by 10. New Mexico by 10. We would need to see these shifts happen 20 point shifts to the right, which even if Biden stayed on the ticket, polarization would have such a big impact that that wouldn't happen. And if we take a look at where those shifts would happen, it would mostly be in the Rust Belt in New England. The problem with the Rust Belt in New England, though, is that Joe Biden had a very, very strong appeal with that demographic. We saw, if we compare results, New York, 13 point shift, New Jersey, 10 point shift, Connecticut, 6 point shift. We saw this area of the country shift heavily towards Donald Trump as a result of Joe Biden not being on the ticket. If we compare this to 2016, the results there, we can, and then seeing the results from past results. 2016, we see, although some of the country shifted towards the right, we see overall not as much as it did in 2024. We see every single area in New England shifted towards Donald Trump by significant margins. 8 points in Massachusetts, 4 points in 5 points in Maryland, 10 in New York, New Jersey, 10. In 2016, we saw 8 in New Jersey and 10 in New York, but then we only saw 0.19% in Pennsylvania, 3 points in West Virginia, 3 points in Ohio. And we see 5 points in Vermont, 2 points in New Hampshire. Joe Biden, very interesting appeal to New England Rust Belt voters. And this is why. If we take a look, Joe Biden being a white Catholic voter, in 2020, white voters made 67% of the population, and Trump won them by 58 to 41. By 2024, because if you think about 2020, this was mail-in ballot, the hype around Kamala being a black woman. We see race. White voters made up 71% of the population, which meant 4% increase. And even though Donald Trump did just a little bit, he did 2 points worse of white voters, but since they made 4% more of the population, we saw Donald Trump did better in the New England, the Rust Belt, white working class. Now, this is where Kamala Harris did arguably somewhat decent in best area, black voters. This made 11% of the population in 2024. Actually, I don't know why I'm saying population. The electorate in 2024. In 2020, 13%. And we saw a semi swing towards the left versus 2020 and 2024. I'm sick. That's my reasoning for why I sound off. We saw Kamala Harris. She did worse with black men, but much better with black women. I think Kamala Harris does worse to black women on average because we've seen black voters, they've been shifting towards the right ever so slightly, except in Georgia and North Carolina. And then we see Latino voters, Kamala Harris's worst area in the entire country. 13% of the electorate in 2022, no, 2020, with 65% of the vote turned into 11% with 51% of the vote. Kamala Harris won Latino voters by 5% in 2024, when Joe Biden won Latino voters by 33%. We saw a 27% shift in Latino vote in 4 years. This is because of the border. This is because of immigration. This is because of social issues. We saw the shift, heavy shift. Asian voters and other racial and ethnic groups. We saw Asian voters with 4% of the electorate and voted for Joe Biden by almost 30%. Asian voters backed him by 15%. We saw a 15-point shift to the right. With other racial groups, this includes Native Americans, Pacific Islanders. 55 to 41, we see 55 to 41. So a 28-point reversion with those groups of voters, which saw Kamala Harris's absolute demolition in this nation with Hispanic, Latino, Black, and Asian voters. So what does that say for 2024 if Joe Biden had stayed in the race? I think Joe Biden does better with white voters. I think turnout drops among Hispanic and Latino voters because we saw turnout, I think 2016 level turnout, 60% of the population turns out. Drops in black voters, drops in Latino voters, drops in Asian voters, drops in other racial groups. However, an increase in white voters. I think white voters make 75% of the electorate if Joe Biden had stayed in the race. Black voters makes up about 9%, Latino voters 10%, Asian and other racial groups about similar-ish margins. So this is a website called the Demographic Shifter. It's slightly inaccurate just because exit poll data is always not the most reliable. But if we change it to what it was in 2024, white non-college graduates were 44% of the vote in 2020. It was actually less. In 2024, it was only about 38-ish percent. So we see that ish margin. White college graduates, actually not a very bad. It stayed relatively the same, dropped a little bit. Just going to change just a little bit so the margins. Black voters were 13.6% of the vote in 2020. And if we take a look at 2024, that dropped down to 11%. Yeah, 11%. Asians and others made 6% of the population electorate in 2024. About 6%, which means Hispanic and Latino about 11% of the vote. So if we go off those numbers alone, looks like Kamala Harris would have done better because she didn't bleed as much with white voters. She did decently good with Asian American voters. And then we see even we haven't adjusted the Hispanic and Latino vote yet, which did go down. But we overall, we see this. Kamala Harris does better, but that's because we take a look at marginally wise. Exit poll results from CNN. I'm using CNN because that's what Wikipedia uses, and it's just very easy to use, and it has a huge sample size. We took a look at voters with college IDs that are white. Huge part of the population, about 30-ish% of the population. White voters with college degrees back Kamala Harris by 53 to 45. If we take a look at 2020, white voters with college degrees, it decreased a little bit for Kamala Harris, not much though. And then we see Trump do a little bit better with that demographic. We see the margin go from 10 to 8. And then we see white non-college graduates. Trump did decently good with that. He cracked 66% of the vote with it. So he won this group of people by 4 points more than he did in 2020. We see here we see 66%, and that already gives Trump 291 electoral votes. And Kamala Harris, she got 32, so we have to move this margin. 306 to 232, just missing Nevada, which is barely going for Kamala Harris. Next, black voters. Black voters voted Trump by a decent amount more. We see that 86% of black voters voted for Kamala Harris. And we take a look back up with race. We see 13% with Donald Trump. So we see that. Trump gets 312 electoral votes already. Still not winning the popular vote, though. This is where the biggest swings in the entire country come from: Hispanic and Latino votes. The Hispanic and Latino vote swung heavy towards Trump. We see Kamala Harris completely dwindle with that demographic, getting 51% of the vote. We see Donald Trump getting 46% of the vote with Latino voters. Absolutely unheard of in the entirety of exit polls. Trump won Latino men for the first time in quite a while. See, Trump currently leads in the popular vote. We see this. We take a look at exit poll results, Asians versus this demographic of people. So Kamala Harris won Asians by 15%, and Trump won other racial groups by 14%. So if we do the math on that, I'm going to do the math on that real quick. I don't have it memorized. I'm going to use ChatGPT for this because I'm too lazy to do math. Harris wins Asians by 15%, and it's 50% of the vote because using this demographic, just a sample size. Trump wins others by 14%, and it's also 50%. What is the vote margin? So we see Harris wins Hispanics. No, not Hispanic. Harris wins Asian/others by 0.5%. The percentages are 57.5. Okay. We'll just say Harris, she gets, excuse me while I, okay, I'm just going to use the margins on the screen. Trump gets 14. Trump wins other voters by 55 to 41, and it's 50% of the electorate. Harris wins Asian voters by 55 to 40, which, first of all, huge decrease in 2020, huge decrease, and it's 50% of the electorate. We see that complicated math stuff, guys. I'm not very good at math. So Harris gets 48%. It says according to ChatGPT, Harris gets 48% of the Asian other votes. Trump gets 47.5, but that's not a margin, so we're gonna have to do. And here we see almost an exact replica of 2024 with Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Well, not completely. It looks like it's a bit more favorable to Trump. So we're gonna have to go with it. Now we take a look at this thing, existence, the context in which it exists. We see let's say black voters. Let's say black voters dwindle and only 9% of the population. Let's say Hispanic Latinos. Let's just say the vote stays relatively the same, which I think it might. Asian voters, let's just say it decreases by tenths of a percent. Trump gets his quote unquote mandate with 50.4% of the vote. You haven't even addressed white voters yet. White voters, I do think, increase. White voters with college degrees, I think this vote share increases. I'm going to say it gets 35-ish% of the vote. And then I think white voters with non-college degrees decreases just a little bit. So we see the margin. Trump wins Nebraska's second congressional district. I'm kind of iffy on whether he wins that in this scenario or not. So we see this. I think with white non-college graduates, I think the margin decreases just a little bit. And with white college graduates, Harris gains about Harris gains about 2% with white college graduates. We see Michigan goes for Kamala Harris in this case, but we haven't even addressed black voters yet. If Trump can do decent, I think he can crack close to 15% with black voters, maybe even more. I'm saying in this scenario, he cracks 17% with black voters. With Hispanic and Latino voters, I think so. This is a map and what it looks like. I have a few issues with this map. Just so we're gonna use this map for minor statistics, but I'm also gonna put my own spin on this. So we're gonna speed run this because this is taking way too long. Washington Harris plus 16.2, I think similar margin. Oregon 14.2. So that would be a likely margin. California, we see California go more for Trump than before because Harris is from California, so that was a little bit extra. And I do think Harris, she wins California, but only by about 19. I'm just gonna do blue states first. Colorado, Harris wins it by slightly less, by about 10.8. Um, Hawaii, somehow Kamala Harris has only win Hawaii by 12. I don't buy it. I think she wins it. I think Joe Biden wins Hawaii by a bit more. Illinois, Harris is only winning Illinois by 12.1, which is actually an increase from where it was before. Like I said, Joe Biden's going to do better with the white working class, better with New England. He's going to do better in the east part of the United States. We're going to see similar margins. Minnesota, 6.6. I kind of disagree with that margin just a little bit. Virginia, 5.4. Once again, I'm disagreeing with a bunch of these margins. Maryland, Delaware, Connecticut, Vermont, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. These are all over 15-point margins. All of them. Same with Maine's first congressional district. Similar story. We see Maine at large, about an 8-point margin. I agree. I think that's going to be that margin. New York. New York's about 17 points for Harris. No, 17 points for Joe Biden. I honestly disagree with that. I think what's going to be a likely margin. I'm just using this as a baseline. I'm not actually going with the margins of it. Delaware, there's no way Joe Biden wins Delaware by that much. New Jersey, about a 9.8 margin. I can see, once again, I do not think New Jersey will shift that much towards Trump if Joe Biden was on the ticket. I think we're still going to see shifts. Not as much. Obviously, DC also. Oh, Be Real went off. Um, just I'm not gonna. I'm just gonna fill my room. Okay, back to the video. I just had to post my Be Real. Y'all, if you have any followers in here, y'all should follow me. Okay, so that's pretty much all the common states I'm gonna deal with for right now. Let's start with Trump states. Basically, yeah, this general entire area of the country, all over. Um, I'm also gonna put Nebraska's first congressional district there. And then state of South Carolina. So when we see the state of Texas, Trump does a similar-ish margin in the state of Texas. Does lose ground in Florida. I don't buy him losing ground in Florida. I don't think he'll win by as much. Texas, similar story. We see Texas. Iowa, we see Iowa and Ohio. Similar margins to 2024, the actual results. We see Maine's second congressional district. We see that as an 8.7 victory for Trump. So overall, similar-ish margins. We're not going to see as much bleeding. Next state, Alaska, 14.1. So just off safe. I think if Biden was on a ticket, we'd see a safe margin. So Trump already got the 219 firewall. And we still have a slew of states that we need to characterize. Start with Nevada. Trump wins Nevada by 4.8. I think in this scenario, just with Hispanic votes, all these trends, 5-point margin. Arizona 4.7, similar 5-point margin. I don't see Biden doing that much better in Arizona. Well, he might do a bit better because of the McCain factor and everything, but I think similar-ish 5-point margin. Georgia 7.9 in Georgia. That is absolutely ridiculous, even with this shift, 7.9 in Georgia and 6.3 in North Carolina. The black vote shifting towards Trump. I don't think it's going to be that much, but overall, 5-point margins in each. So Trump just needs one more state to win. Let's take a look at Nebraska's second congressional district. That's a Harris plus 2.4. Harris only won it by about 2.4.7. Do I want to give Trump Nebraska's second congressional district? Narrow. I'm going to narrowly give Trump Nebraska's second congressional district. So there we go. He wins the election already. New Mexico and its 5 electoral votes. It says Harris is supposed to win by 2.4. I know I said Hispanic trends aren't going to have that much of an impact. However, I'm gonna give Trump a little bit more. I think less voters would have voted for the Green Party. I'm giving Trump more people with. I'm gonna give Trump 3 points of the Hispanic vote, and I think it also does lose a little bit. Popular vote margins aren't very accurate, so don't look at that. Oh boy. Do I want to characterize these states? Michigan 0.6, Pennsylvania 0.8, and Wisconsin 0.7. I'll agree with this to an extent. I think Pennsylvania's tilt, Wisconsin's tilt. I think Michigan's going to be lean because the air vote probably would have swung a bit more towards Trump. And the black vote going down would have also favored Trump. So we see that. Similar story in Minnesota. Minnesota has a Harris 0.6 margin. First of all, without Tim Walz on the ticket, I'm going to characterize it. Tilt Democratic state. Actually, no, I'm going to make this a lean Democratic state. New Hampshire. Do I want to give New Hampshire to Donald Trump? Because Joe Biden has a decent appeal in New Hampshire. I'm going to make this a lean Democratic state. So where does Donald Trump improve in? I think he narrowly wins the state of New Hampshire by about 1 point. New Hampshire, New Mexico, and I think he wins Virginia. I think turnout in black areas of Fairfax, this area is going to be completely down in votes because it was very down in 2024. I think Donald Trump wins Virginia narrowly. So I know I'm not going for an all-out Democratic landslide. Actually, you know what? Maybe I'll make Minnesota and New Hampshire. I'm not going for an all-out Republican landslide. This is a map I think it's going to be. Thank you guys. Bye. Sorry for yapping.